You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. I have a lot of really cool friends who do a lot of really cool things. I wanted to make it a goal to sit down with these friends and spend about 15 minutes or so getting to know them better and find out about their past, present, and their future. The result is this show. My name is Grant Baciocco, and this is 15 Minutes With. Dan Klass is a podcaster and an actor and a comedian and a dad, and he's here on today's episode of 15 Minutes With. Hello, Dan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you for that.
I know. Well, you told me what I should say as an intro.
Yeah, but I didn't
totally mixed it up.
I didn't say anything about the dad thing. Yeah, that was a curveball.
Well, there you go.
I spent so much time as a dad that being here and not being a dad was actually kind of nice. And then you had to throw the whole dad thing in my face.
But we're going to talk a little bit because I have a couple questions.
Yeah,
about being a dad, a creative dad.
Oh, geez, okay.
But before all that, let's start. Where did you grow up?
You know, that's a good question. I was born in Southern California, in San Bernardino, and we lived there and then in Fountain Valley for a while. But I always feel like I grew up in Rochester, New York, in kind of the suburban, rural-ish part of that area. And then we lived in England for 3 years, and then we came back to Rochester. But so I guess growing up, Rochester, but it kind of in quotes.
Yeah. Rochester by way of England.
By way of England / California. Right, exactly.
And growing up, do you remember like the first kind of creative thing that really captured your interest?
I was trying to decipher that earlier today, and I can't remember if it was that I started doing impressions first or started drawing first. But I became fascinated with impressions when I was probably only 6 or 7. But I was too shy to do them, so I would practice them, and I'd let the family know I could do them, but I didn't want to actually do them because they would request that I. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's that weird like
in the supermarket. Dan, show them how to.
Right, exactly. And you don't. You're like, nah. Like, oh, but it's so cute when you do your thing or what Yogi Bear or whatever horrible thing it was. You know what I mean? But and then I probably started drawing around the same time too. You know, sitting with Mad Magazine or whatever for hours trying to draw like Mort Drucker or whoever, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And were your parents creative at all? Did they have creative outlets?
I think when my dad was much younger, he probably drew a little bit. My mom has always painted, or had painted, I guess, for a long time. Now she's just in this cycle of redecorating their house all the time. Does that count as
creative? Sure, that's creativity.
Basically, what would happen is, so my dad worked for Kodak, and he'd get transferred every 2 or 3 years, which was the perfect amount of time for my mom to move in and redecorate, finish the house, and then he'd get transferred. And so she's just kind of maintained that cycle.
Every 3 years.
No matter whether they move or not. Yeah. So that's kind of been her thing. But I think their generation, the gravitational pull towards normalcy was stronger than any creative whatever, so they became normal Americans.
Yeah.
You know?
And in grade school, junior high, were you like performing? Because you're an actor and you've done acting. When did you kind of get the acting bug? Was that in that time?
Well, Grant, when I was about I guess I was 9 or so, I was in a rock group called the Neighborhood Swingers.
Wow.
Which was actually a lip syncing outfit where we'd rehearse in my basement, and then we would do performances outside. And we would lip sync to the Osmond Brothers and the Jackson 5, and I was the lead mimer. And so that actually was kind of the beginning of my public, whatever. But I auditioned for. I'm horrible at auditioning. I've always been horrible at auditioning. So I auditioned for a couple school plays, and I guess I started in middle school. And in elementary school, we got assigned parts in a play. And I wouldn't say I had like one line in this play, and I wouldn't say it loud enough. Then the teacher literally took me outside across the baseball diamond and said, okay, now you have to yell, you know what I mean, to like get me to say my lines.
Yeah.
So I think in some ways I probably was like the worst kid to decide to be an actor in that way. But in earnest in middle school.
Yeah.
Where I ended up playing Charlie Brown in our school. You're a good man, Charlie Brown, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then just kind of kept going with it all through high school and past that. So
And it's funny that you say, because I want to talk to you about music too. It's funny that you say your first thing was lip syncing to music.
Oh, yeah.
But music, it seems to me, just from what I know of you, is a huge part of your life and has been for a long time.
It's not as much now, I think, just because I'm so deep into middle age that you start to feel too removed, I think, from popular culture. But yeah, music has always been definitely. Where I would sit in my room for hours and memorize those Jackson 5 records, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like every note, every pause, every drum fill, everything. And I mean, to this, I can play a little guitar now, but I didn't learn until maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I was never willing to go through the pain of actually learning to play an instrument, so I would just stand and hairbrush mime into my mirror, you know what I mean?
Right.
But music has definitely been for someone. It's almost sad that I don't play an instrument for how important music has been as an appreciator of music.
Right.
With having no skill in that area whatsoever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And when so you get out of high school, did you continue acting like in college?
So, well, it was one of those things where when I was in high school, it became time to start auditioning or start applying to college, and the term that I coined at that time was that I was an insecure egomaniac, which meant I thought I was potentially the greatest performer that had ever been born, but I was convinced that no one would ever agree with me ever for my whole life. So I was very, and I'm really lazy and I have attention issues. So I just wasn't good about auditioning for colleges. I auditioned at Carnegie Mellon. They said, you can come and study anything but acting. You'd be happy to have your dad's money. But I didn't really do the serious audition circuit.
Yeah.
I ended up going to Syracuse University and studying advertising and psychology, and spent way more time doing plays and radio shows and TV shows in college than I did studying advertising and psychology. You know what I mean? So yeah, all through college, I did a play. Well, first I arrived at school and then auditioned for this Saturday Night Live show. And became kind of the white Garrett Morris of that. Definitely a third or fourth tier non-writing performer. And then, but then did a play. But then I got involved in morning radio while I was in college. And so for 2 years we did an FM morning radio show on WJPZ in Syracuse, which is the first wholly student-owned and operated radio station, I think, in the country.
Wow.
Great learning experience for everybody. And, met a lot of great people that I'm still in contact with, all, doing both the TV stuff at UUTV and then there at JPZ and all that. But, yeah, always was performing. Yeah, definitely.
Well, it's funny that we'll get to podcasting because
right.
that's a big part. But it's funny that you did, or it's interesting that you did radio, and that would seem like it would kind of prepare you for doing podcasting.
Yeah, and the weird thing about the radio, too, I loved it, but... it's always so weird, and maybe this will be a reoccurring theme as we talk, is you don't really know as you're growing up, especially when you're younger, who you're meeting and how your lives will progress or whatever, you know what I mean? Because when we were at the radio show, we were just messing around. It was the morning and we were all exhausted and whatever, but the people that I was on the air with, one of them owns a big radio syndication company now. One of them has a big radio show on Sirius. He's like a celebrity Catholic priest, Father Dave Dwyer. One of us is a NPR news correspondent or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's just one of those weird things where you realize maybe a little too late, we're screwing around, but this is actually...
We're learning.
Kind of serious, too.
Yeah.
We could actually continue to do this forever.
Yeah.
Even though it's this much fun. So, but that was an important step for me as far as starting to write comedy and perform comedy, or improvise / write, half write comedy and half try to pull it out of my sphincter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had written a little bit of prose, for a graduation present. A friend of mine gave me a Woody Allen book of his prose. I don't know if it was Without Feathers or what, but Reading Without Feathers changed everything, I think, and made me like, writing comedy would be fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I didn't really feel like I started maybe until college. Although I guess, my friends and a couple friends of mine did a Wayne's World type TV show where this is the early 80s, so they had like a big Betamax machine and one of those gigantic suitcase-sized cameras, and they shot this quote-unquote TV show. And they had me join them for the second episode or whatever, and that actually was the beginning of like writing comedy and writing sketches and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, then you kind of graduate, and graduation's weird because everyone's like, okay, you're done, go go home now and begin your real life. And not all the doors, college, all the doors are open. I mean, everything's just like, yeah, come on in and take a seat, and we'll,
right. You don't have the Betamax machine at home.
Right, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, college was fantastic. Syracuse was great.
When did you start doing stand-up comedy? Is that after you moved to LA, or?
The first time I did stand-up officially was, maybe like, let's say, I don't know, February of 1988, at a place that's no longer there in New York called the Comedy U Grand. It was on Grand Street. And, I'd been memorizing Bill Cosby and Bob Newhart for 10 years by then, at least, you know what I mean? Well, probably 15. And, was really excited to do it, but it was just, the first time you do stand-up where your stomach is in knots and that spotlight is in your eyes, it just was the most horrifying experience of my life. But that was the first time. But I didn't really start in earnest until I moved to LA.
Yeah. And what brought you out to LA?
I wanted to be a sitcom actor. I wanted to be, not to date myself. You're in college and you want to be Chevy Chase if you're my age, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As weird as that sounds in 2016, but yeah, I wanted to be on sitcoms, and I wanted to do stand up. And what better way to do stand up than to come to one of the 2 or 3 epicenters of stand up to try to get your sea legs in the most public, like it's the stupidest thing I've ever done. You know what I mean? Like you should learn how to act and then come to LA, or learn to do stand up and then come to LA, or learn, whatever your craft is, and then come to LA. To learn here is somewhat counterproductive. Right. But yeah, I started at the open mics here in clubs and like crappy bars. It was even pre the 90s coffee house scene, and that kind of got big, and then the alternative scene kind of blossomed. But that was back in the 90s where you'd go to an open mic and like when I started, Jamie Kennedy was around all the time, but then once the alternative scene, and I don't even remember if you were part of that scene or not, but like you'd be sitting on a coffee house and Patton Oswalt would be there, Jack Black would be there, Margaret Cho and Janine Garofalo, like you'd sit, and people that are huge stars now, would just be hanging out and just performing for free every night of the week, all the time. Yeah, it was. And you got a sense of it at the time, but it's weird to look back at it now and go, wow, yeah, I used to see, like everybody used to see Tenacious D for free, like at a coffee house or whatever. That was no big deal. Yeah.
I think I kind of hit LA like towards the very tail end of that, because there would be things where like, oh, Patton's here, and a couple other people, but Maria Bamford were there, but it was sort of, I think it was sort of at the tail end of that. That whole.
Yeah, scene. I think I met Maria Bamford. I think she literally still had the smell of the airplane air on her clothes. She had just arrived here. She was still playing her violin as part of her act, and then she found out that there was a comedian named June Melby who'd been in town for a long time who also played a violin. So I guess the violin like got put away. Yeah. But you could just tell right away that Maria was a singular presence. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so, we would try to con her into doing as many of our, bringer shows as we could, because she was just always so good. Yeah. So funny, yeah.
You also got some acting gigs.
Yeah.
A couple of them, right?
I did,
and that's enough to make you continue to pursue it, yeah?
Well, that's how they keep you in the business, is they give you a little bit of work, get you hooked, and then you get just enough work to not want to leave, but definitely not enough work to get the insurance that covers antidepressants.
Right.
That's the key. That's the key to keeping actors in town willing to work. So yeah, I mean, so I did stand up. So I eventually got better as a comedian, right? And that kind of, and we would do the thing. You do showcases and people bring agents, and a comedian that I knew named Jackie Guerra, recommended me to her agent, and she had just signed a deal with the WB to star in a sitcom, and so she hooked me up with her agent, and they started sending me out a little bit, and I worked a little bit with them, and then I met another agent. So yeah, I started going out in like the 90s, I guess it was. I did Chicago Hope and the X-Files, and I don't know, more shows that I should be able to name, but Touched by an Angel, I guess, I don't know. But you do like a handful of shows or whatever, and you always you always think that it's gonna, like, you think that, well, yeah, I'll do a couple of things and I'll get my big break and I'll have my own show or whatever, and the
Right.
reality of it is you better be in it for the long haul, because such a tiny fraction of a fraction of a fraction of people get to relax.
Right.
But the vast majority of us, you don't you never relax.
Yeah, you're looking for
And
your next.
all the people that you see on TV, unless they're the star of the show, they're really not. I mean, it's impressive to find out how much they make a day until you realize how infrequently they work, and then you realize, oh my God, that's like $1,000 a year. That's horrible.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? But I made it in one day. I made $1,000 in a day. Yeah, but you didn't work again
Right.
until after your next birthday. You know what I mean? Like, perspective.
Yeah.
But yeah, and kind of the bummer about that, in all honesty, was I was lucky enough to have really, really good representation, and end up on a couple of really good shows before I had experience on sets. I had been to acting school for 2 years or 3 years or whatever, but it's just one of those crazy, like, oh, if I had those opportunities now that I have this much set time under my belt, I'd be a completely different actor, auditioning differently and working differently. So yeah, but that's that's life. That's one of those things you have no control over. You know what I mean?
Right.
But and then I started doing commercials at a certain point, and that actually kind of became the thing that I was most successful at, if you can call it success, being commercials. I don't mean to downgrade it, but you know what I mean? It's like, you don't want to do commercials until you realize that you can actually make a living doing commercials, and then you super want to do commercials, but not obviously forever.
Right.
But I've been very lucky commercially. I think it's because 30 seconds is about the extent of my attention span, and so I can go into an audition and be really pretty good for 30 seconds, and then drop the mic and walk out. But if I have to like go in and do a long scene, there's plenty of time for that to go south. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I can go in, be wacky, leave.
What piece of audition advice would you give somebody if they just had that new airplane smell, they just got off the airplane,
That new airplane
and
smell.
they wanted to audition, that you have learned from your experience?
I got to think about that for a second, because I'm still learning so much about it. It's so easy to, at least for me, it's really easy for me to mind myself when I'm in the audition. And I guess a valuable thing, well, one valuable thing is just to kind of try to look at it from the point of view of the casting director, which is, there's some weird insecurity I think that actors have, and I am definitely one of these people, where there's this adversarial emotion that gets brought up in an audition situation. And I don't know if it's because the audition has to be conquered somehow. You know what I mean? The casting director wants you to do an outstanding job, and their whole day could be made if you came in and just kicked ass, right? So that's all they really want from you. But what happens is, it's so easy to go in the room, and then you're like, hey, I'm Dan or whatever, and I'm horrible at small talk. I'm like socially just the worst person ever. So I get super self-conscious about small talk or whatever, and then they'll be like, okay, we'll start in just a second, and then the casting director will go out and then come back in, and you realize you're not actually the most important person in the world, and you can kind of just get a little lost and take the attention off yourself, or I don't know, it's easy to get overwhelmed in an audition for a TV show or a movie. And I saw this great clip of Bryan Cranston talking about auditioning, and his advice was, listen, just get the sides, come up with the way you want to do it, come up with a character or a characterization or however you work, do your thing, go in, show them what you would do with it, and then walk out. And that is the advice. That's really all it is. All the other stuff about, did she think I was being insincere when I said I liked her glasses? Because I actually did like her glasses, but the way she said thank you, it sort of seemed like she thought I was trying to kiss her. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You have to dislodge that kind of self-defeating monologue if you're crippled by that, and just Cranston that crap. You know what I mean? And just go into like, this is how I would do it. Because you don't know what they're looking for. A lot of times they don't know what they're looking for. They just want to see, well, how would Dan do it? How would Grant do it? How would Steve do it? How would Joe do it? Oh, I think actually Joe would probably be good with the star in that situation. You know what I mean? Like, you can't solve the Rubik's Cube for them. You just go in and go, I'm blue and I'm available.
Right.
And the rest is kind of up to them, you know?
Yeah, that's great. I want to talk about podcasting because when I first heard about podcasting, which I think was maybe October of 2004 or something, I read about it and then started looking. Your podcast, The Bitterest Pill, was one of the first ones I came across. You and Mur Lafferty was the
is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
And what made you, how did you hear about it? And then what made you say like, oh, look at this as an outlet?
What is this? Right. So, so I first heard about it. My wife, so this is 2004, right?
Yeah.
My birthday's in late September. And for my birthday, and we were not early into the game, but my wife bought me an iPod, which seemed like such an it was such an extravagant gift, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was back in the click wheel, gray screen, right? Big, fat, chunky iPod. And I was so thrilled. And I was so thrilled at the prospect of having an iPod that the first thing I did is I started researching cases. Because you have to protect your iPod.
Right.
Because they're made to be beautiful, but then you have to go to like Case Logic and get a crap case. Right. Okay. So I was just looking for an iPod case, and for whatever I put in the search engine, spit out this thing about radio, iPod, podcasting, blah, blah, blah. And I just clicked on a video. I don't even know who the guys were on the video. It might have been, Kevin Rose or one of those guys. You know what I mean? But they're talking about podcasting, and people are doing radio shows, and you download it to your iPod, and blah, blah, blah. And it had literally been maybe 3 or 4 months before that our friend Lance Anderson from Verge of the Fringe podcast and I had been talking about, what are they called? Those like low-range radio, and how you can get a license to have like a radio station that only goes for X number of miles, because we just were like, we've got to do something and get our stuff out there. And we had done all this research about radio, and it was like, well, that's ridiculous. We live in LA. You can't start a radio station, like just physically can't start one in Los Angeles. So I heard about it and did a little research, and then I think a bunch of people went to some sort of blogging conference in late October of that year, 2004. Gohagan and Butler, like all those like super founders of podcasting, and then I started November 3rd or 4th of 2004. Copying and pasting my RSS feed from something I downloaded from Dawn and Drew or Michael Gohagan or something. Because I'm not a coder. I don't know anything. You know what I mean? I'm smart enough, or I was at the time, and I had enough whatever, that I just sort of stared at the code and like, okay, I think this is the code that says what the next show is. Yeah. So I'll just see if it works if I, cobble this together.
That's what I always say to people. I go, back in those days, we were hand coding our RSS
literally,
feed.
Like, yeah, you learn a lot
and
very
if
quickly.
One semicolon was off,
you're dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was, those were exciting times. And then I think you and I met. It's funny. At the time, everything seemed to be taking a long time. And then I look back and go, yeah. So you started in November, and then we started doing those like Orange County podcaster meetups. I think early, maybe even the next year or something.
Yeah.
To me, it was like this long expanse, but I think even like there were podcasting expos within a year.
Right.
Like I think Michael Gohagan was a podcaster that did a thing called Real Reviews, and he and I wrote a book, the book Podcast Solutions. I think we were done writing it, and it was still 2005, if you can imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, it seemed like so much time had passed, but it was really, it could have been less than a year from at least from me starting. You know what I mean?
And what was the idea behind your show? Like, I'm just going to talk, or
the idea? Well, so when I was doing stand-up, it was a lot of socio-political stuff. You know, I'd read Newsweek and I'd read the newspaper and I'd write jokes about, you know, whatever the politicians were doing or whatever, you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll and that kind of thing. So I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll just, you know, it'll be that, you know,
right?
And I'll just be an a-hole and I'll talk about politics and whatever, because that's what I do. But it didn't dawn on me that I hadn't been doing that for years, that I had been a stay-at-home dad for, I guess, 5 years by that point. I had not been doing stand-up for 5 years or more, and I wasn't that guy anymore. So I came up with the name of the show, The Bitterest Pill. I sat down and I recorded the first show. The first show, I think, was like 10 minutes, and it was just me going, oh my God, this is so weird. Here's a song. You know what I mean? Like, it was as if it was live. I mean, I was a nervous wreck that first show.
Right.
But it very quickly became a show about me talking about being a dad and me talking about uncomfortable encounters with celebrities, like seeing celebrities or meeting celebrities or whatever. And, you know, a lot of people early on in podcasting really wanted to hear about someone that was near celebrities and really wanted to hear about like family stuff, because no one, you know, there weren't podcasts at all, right?
Right.
So there are no podcasts.
Right.
So there's no radio show to listen to where people talk about their kids.
Right.
And are not like a 35-year-old TV mom who's trying to do a daytime talk show. You know what I mean? Like, no one was servicing that. And also, no one in show business talks about, or at least then, talked about show business from an outsider's point of view. Because once you're in, and you have to maintain all the curtains that are up to protect the audience from backstage, right? So I think people found that kind of interesting too. So yeah, I was very lucky. I got a lot of listeners very early on.
Yeah. With
very little self-promotion or whatever, you know.
Well, The Bitterest Pill is great. It's still going. You're still producing episodes.
In theory, it is. Yeah, I mean, I'm on hiatus for the summer.
Right.
Usually, I inadvertently take hiatus in the summer, but this year I've officially taken hiatus in the summer.
Right. Well, that's fine.
But yeah, it's been since 2004. It's like 350 episodes or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going strong. It's been a weird ride in that I'm horrible at promoting it because it's so personal. The stories have gotten so personal and revealing that it's hard for me to go, hey, listen to me talk about how my wife and I are fighting. Right. It's hilarious.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in theory I do still do the show. Absolutely. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Well, as we're wrapping up here, I wanted to talk. I made a promise at the beginning that we're going to talk about being a dad.
But yeah.
Both of your kids are they have creative pursuits. Your daughter is a dancer.
Yes.
And your son Hudson makes movies
yes.
and likes to make short films and stuff. What's it like being a creative person and having these creative kids?
You know, it's simultaneously awesome and horrifying in that, and you and I talked about this a little bit before we started recording, like, you want if you're a creative person, you super, super want your kids to be super talented.
Right.
Obviously, right? Especially if you're going to be attracted to someone that you think is smart and talented and attractive, right? So you want your kids to be all those things. And then your kids are born, and then in my case, I'm very lucky. My kids are very smart and very talented, and I'm a dad, so I'm biased, but they're also very physically attractive. Okay, so, but you do get to a certain point where, like, I sure hope she doesn't want to be a dancer when she grows up. I want her to be like a doctor or something. You know what I mean? Right. So, because I know the emotional, financial struggle of trying to be creative as your primary focus. And I think because of that, I really struggle with giving my kids the freedom my parents. See, my dad had a very white-collar job. He did very well for himself in kind of managerial level corporate America. And so my parents said, you can do whatever you want. Yeah, if you want to be an actor, you want to do, yeah, we support you. Now I'm in that situation. I'm like, well, I support you. I feel bad for you that I gave you my genes and you want to do this because I know it's hard. And as a parent, I don't want you to feel any pain or discomfort ever.
Right.
Right. But the truth is, I mean, my daughter is an insanely talented, but also insanely hardworking dancer. And if her mother has, like, because I'm not as hard a worker as she is, so she must clearly get that from her mother. But she's very physically gifted, but she's also incredibly determined and tenacious when it comes to her training. And Hudson, who adores you, by the way, and sends his love and regards. You know, he and I were making puppet shows together when he was still, I think, in first or second grade. So he's always churning out. If it's not a short film, it's like he's writing and producing music now. And he was talking the other day about doing, you know, he's got this idea for a film and this idea for a web series and this idea for a second web. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, I hope that they're happy struggling, you know, to fill that creative need. You know what I mean? I mean,
right.
it's tough, but it's also, I mean, you know, I'm sure everybody listening to this is in the same boat. Like, when you do it and you step back from those projects, even if you're like me and get super neurotic about things, there is hopefully that moment of like sincere, open-hearted reflection where you're like, yeah, you know what, that is what I do, and that is what I love to do, and it does have value, even if no one's paying me $30 million a year to do that. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I'm glad that I put that into the world. Now, maybe only 10 or 20 people enjoy it, but those 10 and 20 people, right, they like really got something out of it. And so hopefully for them, at the very least, they can enjoy the process and appreciate, you know, their output.
Well, that's awesome. If people want to find you online, where can they go?
You know, the easiest place, I guess, is danklass.com. Mm-hmm. Class with a K. Not really creative on the domain registration. I was smart enough to do it super early where I didn't have to get like the real danklass.com or anything. Right. You know what I mean? Like, but yeah, it's just Dan Klass. That'll take you everywhere. Or the bitterestpill.com is the podcast. But yeah, you know, it's all there-ish.
All right. Well, Dan, thank you so much for talking to me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Dan Klass was today's guest on 15 Minutes With. You can visit his website over at danklass.com. That's DANKLASS. And you can also listen to episodes of The Bitterest Pill over at thebitterestpill.com. 15 Minutes With on the GrantCast is a production of Saturday Morning Media and made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a monthly donation for as little as $1 a month. Huge thanks to Shay Stewart, Mer Lafferty, Jeb Peterson, Dale Gadania, Stephen Staver, Jackie Klimo, Melissa Crawford, Chuck, Matthew Wayne Selznick, Dave Slusher of the Evil Genius Chronicles, Mike Coughlin, Dorothy Baciocco, John D., Kathy Crawford, Brian Greer, Carrie Whitney, Chuck Tomasi, Chris Foster, Stephen Ng, Clinton of ComedyForecast.com, Vicky DeVries, Mike Wabshall, Twitter user Butzingear, a.k.a. Wildcat, Eve Cunning, Mike Hamilton, Gaston Moreno, and Reed Loveland. If you'd like to support this show and the other fun content from Saturday Morning Media, become a patron. Head on over to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up your donation today. You can also tell a friend about the show or leave the show a review on iTunes. And while you're over there at iTunes, be sure to click that subscribe button. That way you'll get new episodes the moment they're released, and you'll help other people find out about the show. If you have any feedback for the show, you can send it directly to me at grant@throwingtoasters.com, or you can get in touch via Twitter, where my username is ToasterBoy. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time. The GrantCast is copyright 2016 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Baciocco, executive producer. All rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com. You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.